It's a wine night, clearly. What an auspicious night to read. I'm just so thrilled. Thank you, Wyatt, for having me up here on the plateau again. I don't know why you keep encouraging me. Khaki and Kevin, who I just realized you're the super twins. That's and to the staff, who I've known many of you. For you're like my family. And Cherie, I would say you're my fairy godmother, but I guess I have to share you with a lot of other people. I am going to read from this monster I've been working on for quite a long time, and I would like nothing better than to just launch into it. But I guess I'll have to give you some. I can no longer read around the fringes. I have to go into the heart, so I won't repeat myself. It is about a group of young people called the Army of Perambulating Prestidigitators in the late 60s and early 70s. And it consists of 4 people. One is a young woman named, they're harmless people. They're after mischief, and sometimes the mischief goes a little too far. But there's one woman named Fatima Y, who was a grad student in anthropology at Berkeley until she dropped out to join a biker gang and then the Black Panthers. There is a young man named Nathan Adams, who is an idiot savant, who has very high math skills, and he also has synesthesia. There is a Mandan Indian who also is very gifted mathematically, and his name is Jesus Beckworth. And there is a young black man from Timms Creek, North Carolina, named Elihu McElwain, who's sort of the main cat. He went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the early in the early 60s, and he on a very prestigious math scholarship. He also is gifted with math. And something bad happened in 1963, and he went on the lam, and he returned 7 years later with his little army, and they abducted 2 little boys, the richest white boy and the richest black boy, in Chapel Hill. And that's where we're starting. This is the early part of the book, and each chapter sort of tells you how Elihu met each of these members of his little tribe. And this one is how he met Jesus Beckworth. So the early part is in 1970, and then we flash back. The book is called There's a Man Going Around Taking Names. Do you believe in magic? Oh, and this is, I just wanted to just say, this has strong language, as my mother would say. Good. And not just sexually, even though there's some of that in there. But it's all about love, people. It's all about love. Do you believe in magic? How high the moon? Jesus played the guitar part, the violin part as well. The song meant something to him in a particular and lascivious way, a feeling that rode the sound waves as unmistakable as a diving blue jay. This gypsy style was his favorite. His hero, Django Reinhardt, just one man on one guitar, Jesus, but he alone could evoke the 1947 ensemble. The drum-like strumming, the soaring arpeggios, the ascending and descending runs, the melody, sweet and clear, the famous high, choking top register that made everybody's cold toes curl to hear it. He was that good. Somewhere there's music, how faint the tune, and even higher, the pings, the single plucked notes that twinged the heart and made even little boys gasp. How high, how high, high, high. They sat on the buckled porch, the 6 of them, listening to Jesus play in the hot sunshine. Elihu smoked a cigarette, keeping a watchful eye on Jean-Luc, who leaned against the door jamb, arms crossed, as if he might run inside the hot house at any moment glancing occasionally, purposefully, at his tall captor as if to say, I ain't afraid of you. Fatima, who tapped her foot to the rhythm against her will, thought about Lennon and Marx and Margaret Mead and the rumor of the decadence of jazz, in which she did not believe, but which she considered writing about. One beautiful day, after this crazy shit was all over and done with, and after she somehow got back into school, perhaps a dissertation on how jazz was like folk music and what music could do, she was sure Jung would be of assistance. Nathan Adams danced. He wished Jesus could always bring these colors to his world. The colors expanded him and made him feel like ocean inside. Ocean and great mountain, and sometimes even warm bed like Christmas, but also warm bed like summer, fireflies, a yellow, green, happy nighttime tingle, happy warmth. The pings made him shiver with green. Nathan Adams danced. Pudgy Owen, so easily placated with a Dr. Pepper, gazed upon Jesus' long brown fingers as they sped up and down the neck of the battered guitar, elegant and strong, and he felt at age 10 the first twinges of what he would later know to be arousal. He did not close his mouth for the entire tune. He did not want Jesus to stop playing ever, ever, ever. In these moments, these impromptu concerts on the porch of this new and pitiful prison, he was happy in a way that made him forget his baronial bedroom in his grandfather's house or the boats off Martha's Vineyard. It shamed him and frightened him to think that he never had been this happy in those places. Maybe, perhaps, only while eating Clem's blueberry pie. But he did not want to think about what that understanding meant. He wanted to just listen to the tall brown man play his blue guitar. Somewhere there's heaven, it's where you are. Did the alligators and the swamp rats and mosquitoes of the Holly Shelter Swamp dance to Jesus' frets and strums? Did the North Carolina humidity transmogrify into a Paris tavern alight with painted women and men in fedoras, absinthe and red wine and fine cigars? Did Rambo come to Pender County in the late summer of 1970? Did the mockingbirds bob to the gypsy trills? To Jesus, it was all math. Bach was math. Thelonious Monk was math. Lester Young, Miles Davis, Verdi, Vivaldi, Billie Holiday, all math. Fugues and counterpoints, syncopation, all math. When he improvised, he not only saw the notes, each to each, but also the equations, the intervals, overlapping and intricate and beautiful meshes, math, music, love, sex, all depended on the beat, the note, time, space, vibration. The beginning of a beautiful friendship. Colder than a witch's tit. That's how everybody I talked to described that night in October in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Colder than a witch's tit. Why do we assume a witch would have icy nipples? Shouldn't she be a fiery, devilish, appealing thing? Wouldn't her memories invite rather than chastise? Wouldn't they be large, voluptuous, inviting, alluringly sinful things? Or is that phrase just another shred of misplaced misogyny? Regardless, that's how they described the night in North Dakota, the night the devil met Jesus. The bar had been dubbed the Kicking Mule by its owner, who opened the doors for business on the border of the university in downtown Grand Forks in the fall of 1959. He had hoped to cater mostly to UND students, but servicemen from the Air Force Base found it first. The beer was cheap and good, and the Kicking Mule quickly got a reputation as a rough and tumble place. The owner, one Max Friesdorter, didn't fret too much over the unexpected turn in clientele. Military money spent just as good as student money. And not only were there more of them, but they probably, improbably, drank more than the students, but also fought harder. Though I found the burly young man at the center of the confrontation that night, he remembers what happened in only the broadest of outlines, surely muddled over time by talking with documentarians and journalists not unlike myself. And certainly he doesn't remember exactly what Jesus said to him on that bitterly cold night. Records show it was 16 degrees, below zero the next morning. Regardless, the gist of it was a sexual innuendo, and the man, all of 19 at the time, a Baptist from Mississippi, took instant umbrage and pushed the Indian to the ground. Despite Jesus' height and bulk, the young specialist was out drinking that night with 5 buddies, and they had been drinking for 6 straight hours when the ugliness occurred. Jesus was the only Indian in the Kicking Mule Bar and Grill that night. Though Indians were allowed in, their company was customarily shunned. Max Fried's daughter, who voted for Adlai Stevenson in the last election, didn't mind serving Indians in his establishment, unlike many of his kin, and seeing them belly up to his bar, but he did mind altercations in his place of business. He reached for his Louisville Slugger, which he kept at an easy reach behind the whiskey, and quickly said, while trying to make his wide Icelandic shoulders even wider, "Take it outside, boys." "Come on," one of the drunk flyboys said, "let's kick his ass." And unceremonially, they raised the tall Indian, who was at the time all of 20, to his feet and forced him out the door into the witching night, the cold night. Did Jesus resist? Did Jesus laugh? Was he looking to get his ass kicked that frigid night, that cold night, that peculiar night? Surely there's nothing improbable about a bar fight in a university town on the edge of a nuclear facility. But that my father and my uncle, whose IQs together were probably higher than anyone in the state, would meet under these circumstances, well, there is a nice math problem for you to solve. My father had been on the run for 8 months from North Carolina to North Dakota. I have no clue as to what brought him there. I suspect perhaps there was a cousin who was working for the Air Force, but the truth of it remains a mystery. I have found no proof. I do not know what Elihu Increase McElwain was doing in Grand Forks, North Dakota in the fall of 1963. Nonetheless, while the flyboys took clumsy jabs at Jesus, did he fight back? "I recommend you leave him be." 4 black men from the base, 1 young blood with a southern accent, 5 white Air Forcemen. Between them, 1 very tall Mandan Indian with a bloody lip. In Hollywood pictures, punches would fly. Witty banter would be exchanged. Limbs perhaps broken, heads cracked. In truth, the largest, beefiest white fellow, whom I've come to learn was at the time a flight simulation technician, said, "Fuck it." And the flyboys, too drunk to reason, but sane enough to envision their ribs cracked by 3 black janitors and 1 black repairman and 1 black truck driver, and a young black fellow who might have a gun, did my father have a gun, retreated into the snowbanks to their car. The black men grumbled at the cold and the snow and the drunken troublemakers and ambled back into the bar for 1 more drink. And Jesus, helped to his feet by a young man he would soon discover to be his exact age, and who asked if he could buy the bruised, long-haired guy a drink. "Damn, how tall are you, brother?" Only the Lord knows, truly, how it commenced. Their friendship, their unlikely bond, their blood oath. How does one math whiz recognize another math whiz on a cold North Dakota night in a noisy, smoky bar an hour before last call with Patsy Cline playing loud on the jukebox? Does one comment on a certain curiosity with counting toothpicks? Or an observation of a particularly interesting, infinitely dense set? Or does one merely say, "You know, I woke up in the middle of the night last night thinking about Fourier's series of theorems"? I imagine it was a sort of conversation reported by many who had the pleasure of witnessing these two together, Conversations that range from comic books to Chairman Mao, to geology to Vietnam, from Allen Ginsberg to Euclid, to conjugating Latin verbs and organic chemistry, from Kurt Vonnegut to boot leather and to movies and back again, and always so ultimately to math, the inexhaustible topic, a topic which gave them both hard-ons and made them feel immortal, not human, beyond the care of love or sex or food or drink. Numbers was their stimulant, their intoxicant, their entire and complete being. That, and I'm sure they also at some point stumbled upon their mutual love for the movie Casablanca. However it came about, Elihu and Jesus fell into such a deep conversation that they wound up talking in the truck until the sun came up. And Jesus offered to let Elihu crash at his place at the Res at Sparrow Hawk Point. Elihu agreed. Indeed, where else was he going to go? I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I consider them both now, and I think they were both so very young. At 20, Jesus Beckworth was already well on his way to becoming a full-fledged hippie, the type of hippie that would scare most middle-class Americans to death and keep them far away from their children. 6'6" tall, his hair midway down his back, he was not easy to miss in a crowd. Jesus knew all of Allen Ginsberg's Howl by heart, not to mention scores of other beat poets. He loved the beats. He lived for the beats. He aspired to be a beat poet. You want to see some of my poetry, man? Seriously, I write. Elihu smiled as he listened to the mixture of peacenik rhetoric and native lore and mathematical metaphors and Tolkien fantasy. To look upon Jesus and not know him was to see a giant and fearsome warrior who could lop your head off. But to know him was to meet a child full of wonder. He should have been sealed up in some room, working on Fermat's last theorem or puzzling to prove a theorem by Ramachandran, fed intravenously and disturbed only under pain of death. He should have been plied with money and honors and secretaries and graduate students, houses, cars, international recognition, excellent health insurance, and an awesome dental plan. He was that brilliant. To look upon him, you would not know it, so big, rough, and disheveled was he. But such depth does not announce itself, cannot announce itself by natural means. It merely envelops you, passes over you, leaving you, if you're lucky, unbeknownst. For to encounter such intelligence and witness only a scintilla of its magnitude is to be forever dissatisfied with your own puny intellect. Instead, he was running around the high plains, chasing flyboys in mischief, avoiding booze occasionally, and wondering why he was not yet in Vietnam. Elihu understood his own limitations in a way few people do, and he could recognize true genius when he saw it. Jesus blew his mind. Of the many things that the two had in common, school was one. Jesus had no Lowell Crevelton to smooth his way into the University of North Dakota. When Jesus was only 14, he met his would-be savior, his Lowell Crevelton. But unlike my father's mentor, Jesus' young intercessor was neither wealthy nor a math whiz, nor politically savvy enough to understand what his intercession would mean. In many ways, he would have been better off leaving Jesus where he found him, on a barren reservations on the outskirts of north of Grand Forks, happy to tinker with old Fords and tractors and fantasy designs for perpetual motion machines. Indeed, it was just such a design that caught young Cal Northrup's eye and imagination. At 14, Jesus was the very definition of a bad student. His attendance was spotty, he didn't do his homework, he got into fights, he had just daydreamed about race cars and race car drivers and moving to California. But he aced math tests. He could add numbers in his head with the velocity of a DC-3. He was a very smart boy. Cal Northrop was only beginning to realize that cold first winter how smart Jesus Beckworth truly was. Cal Northrop was a well-meaning Quaker from northern Ohio. His parents were both professors at Antioch College. He had gotten the post to teach on the reservation through a Quaker organization founded before the Civil War to aid in the education of Plains Indians. It would later discomfort Mr. Northrop, and to his credit, mildly amuse him to learn years later that the thing that caught Jesus' attention was not his earnest attempts to educate, but his 1950s TV good looks and brilliant red hair. Jesus had never seen a pale red-haired man of 24. The young teacher pushed the boy, miracle of miracles. The boy responded. The teacher bought books. The boy read them. The teacher tested the boy. The boy passed the test. The teacher, thrilled to have discovered a prodigy. The boy became grateful to discover this new world of numbers, a language to express what he had always felt, seen, known. Thanks to this sexy red-haired white man, Jesus was finding a new way to understand the world. When I spoke with Professor Northrop, then a retired professor of comparative literature at Pepperdine, he became wistful, even a bit regretful over what happened when he worked to get Jesus into university. He pressed, he prodded, he wrote letters, he made phone calls, he made personal calls to important people. Even his parents got involved. At one point, they even enlisted the president of Antioch College. "We have a young genius here in this desolate place. We must get him proper training." Oh, the spectacle, oh, the sense of accomplishment. Goodness, a 16-year-old Mandan Indian entered into the University of North Dakota at Grand Forks. A feeling of great accomplishment filled the hearts of all involved. Scholarship, stipend, housing, future dreams. Such dreams they had. Grand Forks, 1959. The professors, only one of whom would actually talk with me, made it very clear they wanted nothing to do with the engine. All it really took was a spiteful chairman of the math department who resented having this delicate matter crammed down his throat by liberal do-gooders who, in his opinion, knew not a damn thing about math. A man who disbelieved in the Indian's true potential, for he had never seen an Indian capable of higher math, though he was open to the possibility. It just was not yet something he had actually witnessed. Therefore, the likelihood was in doubt. A man who felt the money and attention being showered on this Beckworth would be better spent on a more qualified candidate. The UND math department, he was actually quoted saying in the Grand Forks Times, is not a zoo or a nursery school. And the response from the student body was so predictable that it was merely a bore for Jesus to contemplate. He lasted less than a semester. He was not cut out for academia or classrooms, books and tests and blackboards. He much preferred horses and music, and he had a particular penchant for car repair. He had a particular thing for car mechanics, too. His sexual fantasies usually involved a grease-besmeared boy with a cigarette dangling out of the left corner of his mouth, in jeans so filthy they were damn near black, talking of solenoids and rebuilding transmissions, of axles and thrown rods. Jesus washed out by spring break. He was glad to go. He never spoke with Cal Northrop again. Please let us not be naive or silly in this matter. Jesus wanted Elihu's body, but Elihu only wanted Jesus' mind and friendship. But meeting Jesus' sister Matilda altered that dynamic. The house to which Jesus brought my father was closer to a shack and to a young man, then only 20, who had grown up in a ghostly North Carolina mansion and matriculated at North Carolina's most prestigious state school, to bunk in a cold room in a cold house heated by only a pot-bellied stove, with no running water and windows lined with broken glass, shielded by plastic and cardboard. It must have been something like a shock, or maybe not. Too often I underestimate my father's grit. Elihu slept on the floor that morning, as close to the dying coals in the ancient pot-bellied stove as he could get. He woke to a foot kicking his buttock. "Hey, what you doing on my floor? Get up!" Elihu groaned, opened one eye, The short woman with the disheveled hair did not come into focus. She turned to the tall man on the couch. Jesus! And she pronounced it Jesus, not Jesus. Jesus, get up. Do you hear me? Who the fuck is this? Tell him to move so I can put some wood in the stove. Jesus, do you hear me? Are you deaf? And through grumbles, Jesus finally answered, yeah, I heard you twice the first time. Damn, Maddie, can't you let your little brother sleep? Get up! She moved to shake her brother awake. Straight away, she saw the swollen lip and crusted blood. Jesus, what have you been doing? Who is this man sleeping on the floor? She kicked Elihu again. I said get up, it's 9 o'clock. And Jesus introduced his new friend to his sister, Matilda. She was short and shapely and had long hair like her brother, but hers shone in a different way. Her skin was honey dark like his, and her lips were an alluring blackberry color. Jesus actually used the phrase, "Save my life, sis," to which she rolled her eyes. I said he could shack with us for a little while. You should have asked little father first. Shit, little father ain't gonna care. Still, you should have asked first. She peered down at Elihu, still on the floor. You drink coffee, black man? Sis, why are you yelling? Because he won't get off my floor. Yes, ma'am, I do enjoy coffee very much, thank you. He speaks English. Good, now get up. And don't ever call me ma'am again, black man. Jesus and Matilda lived with their uncle, Lucky Pierre Beckworth, though everyone called him Little Father. Little Father had fought in the Great War and returned to the reservation with a great love and understanding of engines. In many ways, his understanding of the combustion engine rivaled his nephew's intuitive grasp of quadratic equations and Gaussian matrices. It was Little Father who had taught Jesus how to repair a carburetor and how to replace a starter. Did my father ever confide in Jesus and tell him of the great sin that had forced him to run in the spring of 1963? I have reason to believe he kept the entire army of perambulating prestidigitators ignorant of his past deeds, even of the general anatomy of his past. Though if he were to spill the beans to anyone, Jesus is his most likely confessor, but a man could make a fortune betting on the unpredictability of my father. He used secrets the way hedge funds managers used money. Mysterious quantities to be hidden or revealed, swapped or sold only by the dictates of the market. There is always a market for secrets, and always there are men and women who can profit from secrets being kept and secrets being revealed. Little Father seemed to warm to Elihu rather quickly, though with such a taciturn man, degrees of warmth were difficult to measure. His hair was snow owl white now, and he wore it in long braids down either side of his front. He was a shade tree mechanic who took work spasmodically. In the colder months, he used an old barn that slanted to one side, rather like the Leaning Tower in Pisa. It did not inspire confidence in anything other than gravity. After Jesus introduced Elihu and said, he'll be staying with us a while, okay? Little Father stopped, looked Elihu up and down, grunted, and went back to work on the Dodge truck engine he was attending. Little Father reminded Elihu of his own equally taciturn great-grandfather. But unlike the elder Elihu, Little Father had no malice about him. This appealed to my father even more. When not with Jesus or Matilda, Elihu would sit and watch Little Father at work for hours, and sometimes they would just sit together in the quiet for the longest time, saying little, if anything at all, watching the great sun make its great arc across the plain sky. One day, Elihu asked, you see many black people out here, Little Father? After a long pause, Little Father said in his admirably even tones, knew a black man once. Came from Alberta, Canada, Amber Valley. Come to work in sugar beets. Is that a fact? Oh, yeah. Wait, seen one more too. When was that? That nigger baseball league come around here one time. Before the war, yeah, seen them too. You mean the Negro Baseball League? That's what I said. Had this fella, what's his name? You know the one, you know him. Jackie Robinson? No, the other one. You know, you can't think of his name. It sounds like something you carry. Satchel Paige? That's him. Seen him too. You saw Satchel Paige playing here in North Dakota? Yep. Eli, who sits with little father, sometimes for hours in silence. Eli, who said to Jesus, I want an Indian name. Now what? You know, like everybody else. You ain't no Indian, man. I know, but can't you make me an honorary one? Why? I heard tell of it happening. It can be done, can't it? You've been watching too many of them Indian and cowboy pictures. Let's say I get you a bag of weed and you shut the fuck up. No deal. I want an Indian name. Brother, you are so fucked up right now. Stop it. I want an Indian name, damn it. Give me one. Okay, you want an Indian name? Yes. Okay, let me see. How's about Dancing Raven? But shouldn't there be a ceremony or something, some kind of ritual? Jesus took the top of a beer can off, chugged down about half of it in a single gulp, and poured the rest over Elihu's head. I now dub thee Dancing Raven. Now will you please shut the fuck up? Elihu ran to the slanted barn where little father was working on a broken down Chevy. A lost cause, but tinkering on it seemed to soothe little father's nerves. Hey, little father! Perhaps Elihu was a bit high that day when he approached the older man. Guess what? Jesus made me an Indian. My name is Dancing Raven. You like that, Dancing Raven? I'm one of you. Little father glared at the dark man-child before him for a good long spell. Elihu sensed something had gone wrong, but couldn't think of anything to say. Give me that wrench over there. No, not that one. The other one. No. Damn it, let me get it. Little father rambled through his toolbox, making such much noise. So, he said, you want to be Indian now, eh? Being a nigga ain't bad enough. You want to be a nigga Indian. I thought you was a smart one, a good one. You ain't so smart. You and my nephew, you think you know everything. You don't know nothing. Little father, I'm sorry, you was just being a fool. That's what you were doing. You think you're so smart. You think you know everything. You don't know nothing, boy. You know my name, Beckworth? You know where that name come from? No, sir. No, you don't. You don't know nothing. James Beckworth. You ever heard of him, eh? Elihu shook his head. No, you ain't heard of him. But you so smart. You know so damn much. James Beckworth was the big nigger chief over all the Crow. You know that, huh? Over in Colorado, James Beckworth. He was a big nigger chief. And me and Jesus and Matilda, we got nigger in us. Nigger and Crow. You got French and we got Spanish. Jesus and Matilda's dad, he was full Mandan. One of the last ones. Ain't but about 6 of them left today. Just 6. Full-blooded, I mean. Little father stopped his rummaging. The metallic clicking did not echo in the chilly barn. He went back to the Chevy. Sometimes you fool around too much. Sometimes you talk too much. Sometimes you should stop talking and listen sometimes, eh? You want to be an Indian? Fine. But maybe you should learn how to be a nigger first. Both roads are pretty rough. He went on under the hood of the Chevy for a long time. Elihu stood in place, a corrected child, trying to figure out the nature of his correction. Now go down to the post and get me some more chewing tobacco. You know the kind I like, eh? Red apple, Dancing Raven. You kids chap my ass. My father liked to say that he was the first black man that Matilda had ever seen, but truth to tell, especially because of the presence of the Air Force Base, she had seen many black men in the fall of 1963, but he was the first black man for whom she had ever cooked breakfast, the first black man whose laundry she'd ever tended, the first black man whose jokes she'd ever laughed at or heard, the first black man who had accompanied her on a walk, the first black man to wash her hair the way he had washed his aunt's hair, the first black man she had nursed through a cold, the first black man whose favorite song she learned, the first black man she kissed. That my father was a romantic is a far-gone conclusion. He knew he had to leave North Dakota after a sweet sojourn, but the manner in which he chose to exit involved a certain wicked romance. He wanted to rob a bank. When Jesus thought of how he came to play the guitar, he thought of it in his mind as the Ballad of Brian. It only lasted 4 weeks, less than a month, in fact, but sometimes enough is enough of enough, which is more than enough. He was 16 and vulnerable and lonely and alone. He hated the University of North Dakota, though he enjoyed the math problems. That day on Main Street, he was wandering, going down to walk along the banks of the Red River. The music reached him as if from a dream, but feisty, peppy guitars theretofore had been the stuff of blues and country western music and bluegrass and dumb shit kickers and mind-numbing TV shows. Yet this music spoke of Moors and crusades and Egyptian lore and myth and sex most dangerous. When he walked up upon Brian, this very large black man with the long hands and immaculately manicured nails, proud in his buskery, in a Midwestern town that didn't know what it thought of black folk, Jesus was instantly and inexorably seized. It did not help that Brian Maddox was one of those Georgia boys who did not know how not to charm. He finished playing the Sheik of Araby, that melancholy tune, and winked at the tall red skin, his audience of one. Jesus had a quarter and didn't hesitate to toss it in the hat. Brian grinned a toothsome, bright grin at the tall teenager and launched into Sweet Georgia Brown. Jesus felt a weakness in his knees and thought nothing of sitting down next to the stranger who coaxed such foreign sounds from this humble instrument. Brian Maddox continued to grin like a sorcerer who knew his own terrible power and reveled in it. Brian Maddox was selling encyclopedias that spring, just released from the military, just back from Europe, a moonlighter and jazz band, taught the guitar by a gypsy on the streets of Paris. Jesus quickly learned that Brian Maddox mixed the truth and lies and that he had, in fact, fallen for a con man. Penniless and handsome, an archetypical drifter who took the UND student to his funky rented room in a nondescript boarding house, the last of its kind in Grand Forks, and used his teenage body rough with his own big body. They were, in fact, like horses in Congress, all sinew and sweat and urgent, ineffable need. Desire was too fancy a word. Jesus had no opinion about neither the blending of truth and lies nor the physical iniquity he committed with the XGI, had he ever really been in the military. But he thrilled at what Brian Maddox, was that really even his name, taught him about music and the guitar and his body. Brian Maddox liked Vienna sausages and yellow clean peaches. Brian Maddox's saliva tasted like tin. Brian Maddox did not believe in underwear. Brian Maddox always slept with one window open no matter how cold outside. Brian Maddox said he sometimes slept with women. On Friday, Brian Maddox said he had a half-white son in Florida. On Monday, he said he had a son in California. Brian Maddox said he once played with Django Reinhardt in Lisbon, Portugal. Brian Maddox said Billy Strayhorn once lended him $500. Brian Maddox wore size 10 shoes. Brian Maddox said he intended to join the Merchant Marines at the end of the year. Of course, Jesus was a quick study, and with a few cues, a few clues, he was off to his own paths of discovery. It was, after all math, all math. By the end of the second week of visiting Brian Maddox in his dingy room, Jesus had learned enough to teach himself chords, notes, music theory well. Jesus had seen more deeply into Pythagoras and scales and intervals and chord structure in an instant what it had taken Brian Maddox years to apprehend. It took him a few weeks, but he scraped together enough to buy his own guitar, a battered Gibson painted by some numbskull, a divine but beguiling blue. Jesus got it for a song. When Brian Maddox disappeared like a character from a blues song, taking his rhythmic long fingers and long dark body with his illicit knowledge of how to arouse, he left but one thing at the boarding house owner. That son of a bitch owes me $25. A 78 Django Reinhardt's Paris, 1945, accompanied by members of Glenn Miller's band, Glenn Miller's Air Force Band. Jesus didn't mind. Everything was all wrong, but everything was all right. He learned to play every song on that album. Jesus was preternaturally good at breaking horses. Most say it was simply because of his size, but size alone does not a good horse breaker make. Perhaps it was a sense of empathy or understanding, of gentleness. Breaking horses takes a certain practice, a certain patience, a certain strength, a certain finesse. It is not only an art, but an act of compassion. My father knew a great deal about animals. He had grown up surrounded by animals, hogs, chickens, cows, snakes, squirrels, rabbits, dogs. But my father knew absolutely nothing about horses. However, such was his confidence, his arrogance, that when Jesus asked, Dancing Raven sloughed him off. Of course I can ride a horse, man. He sucked his teeth and strode out into the corral. Jesus and 4 other men watched in silence as my father approached the frosted roan Appaloosa named Sally and made to mount the mare, well broken in but finicky about her riders. Once he had a foot in the stirrup, Sally commenced to canter forward at a comfortable but accelerating pace, dragging Elihu along behind, his head bouncing up and down in the dirt like a forlorn pumpkin. To their credit, the men did not laugh. Jesus ran out to catch Sally, and 2 men helped him to his feet, dusted him off. True to his nature, he laughed as if he'd just done a take in a Buster Keaton movie. Lost my footing. Yeah, right. Next time, man on top, horse on bottom. I know I run the risk of eroticizing my father, but of course they are erotic people, our fathers. If they weren't, we wouldn't exist, would we? Moreover, you've got to remember the time. Flower, power, free love. Do you believe in magic? I believe that to truly understand how my father came to do what he did, to understand the way in which his brain worked and clicked and proceeded, we must understand the electric ethos of the 1960s. We must remember the rhetoric running riot and the riots running riot. We must remember that we were at war. We must remember how paranoid most people were. We must remember radical chic and black Mau Mau. I was but a snaggle-toothed puppy during that fabled time, and I reach back not into my memory, which is paradisical and rural and largely media-free, but I reach back to the dappled remembrance of others, those there, those who lived there, loved there, ate there, read there, screwed there, understood there. I've read books of the time, seen the movies and television shows, gone through the archives, magazines, newspapers, yet I cannot bring myself to be convinced that my vision of that time is either authoritative, accurate, persuasive, inoffensive, correct. But that is my problem, isn't it? What can we, any of us, do but grapple in the darkness of history and try to locate the light switch? I don't want to spend too much time trying to convince you that what my father and his band of idealistic terrorists did was in any way justified or any less heinous. But personally, I find the how and the why of a thing as intriguing as the where, the what, and the who. As a clergyman, perhaps that is the crux of what I do. Do you believe in magic? And there's a bank robbery, but I'm going to leave that for y'all. When Django Reinhardt was 18, he suffered a great accident by fire. First and second degree burns over half his body. His right leg paralyzed, 2 fingers on his left hand paralyzed. When the doctors insisted they cut off his leg, when they said his life as a musician was over, Django said politely in Romany, "Fuck you." The army of perambulating prestidigitators owned a battered, portable 8-track tape player made by Lear Jet Stereo 8 and a collection of 14 tapes, the bulk of which were purchased at a street festival, 3 for $1. 3 Segovia recordings, including the famous Bach album of 1955, Jimi Hendrix, Aretha Franklin, The Temptations, 3 Joni Mitchell albums, a Bob Newhart comedy album, Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, of course, Billie Holiday, and 1 Django Reinhardt album given to Jesus as a gift by a TWA pilot way back in San Francisco. Are you a real Indian? Jean-Luc, the kidnapped boy back in 1970, had been thinking this question for several weeks now. His ardor had turned into a type of resignation. Only a 10-year-old can fabricate an acquiescence without yielding, a snake-like reserve, and a tireless tending of a grudge, yet pliance and compliance when adults are concerned. The adults remain aware of the child's resentment and resistance. The child maintained rebellion in the face of the facts that you, the child, are at the complete and utter mercy of the adult. But one day, one golden day, the child shall be a man. So, are you a real Indian? Jesus did not speak, he strummed, he tuned. At a point in time, as if well practiced, he gazed upon the black boy, the 10-year-old boy, soon to be 11, the boy he secretly admired, the boy he regretted involving in this harebrained scheme. Jesus simply winked and grinned at Jean-Luc and launched into a very fast-paced 2-2 version of Sweet Georgia Brown. Nathan danced. The diminishing audios in particular made him giddy. They were the very lovely color of green, a decadent collage of green, light green, dark green, forest green, sweet green, marijuana green, dream green, glowing green, Christmas tree green, happy wet green, green like candy, green like sunlight, green like the beginning of time. Time is time squared, +1, plus infinity, green. Green is 4, green is 8, green is 16, green is 246. Merci.